Welcome to the Marvel Alliance podcast, where we cover anything and everything to do with the Marvel Universe. From the comics, TV, and movies, we will go from Earth 616 to the Mojoverse to the TVA in order to bring the Marvel Universe right to you. I'm the man without fear, Chris.
I'm your friendly neighborhood Brent.
Alliance Assemble,
Symbol.
volume 185, and we've got episode 2 of Loki. Man, spoiler alert at that point. This was a great episode.
Yes, absolutely. Completely with you on that. I'm excited to talk about. And of course, we got some other big news to talk about, which I think we have thoughts about as well. So lots to get to this week.
Yes. How's your week been, Brent?
Pretty good overall. I had accomplished some good stuff at work. My refrigerator went out, but no big deal there. Whatever. It can get fixed. So other than that, can't complain.
Yeah. So I've been hinting towards things in the brewing. Last week told y'all I was honored by being named assistant principal of the year for my district. So people are still, even today it's like, oh my God, it's so awesome. And it's just like, I know I'm good at taking compliments, but when the spotlight's on me, it's something I'm not used to. But what I can now officially say is that, thank you, David. What I can say is that the last few weeks I was approached by my district office and to consider a idea that they had, and I officially told my staff that I will be leaving my high school that I'm at, and I've accepted a position at an assistant principal position at elementary school to help the team out there and help continue helping the school out there. And I'm a big believer. I love my district where I'm at, and I said this during my assistant principal of the year interview, and I stand by it that if anyone needs help in the district, I'm there for it. So if they say, hey, we need you to help out Chris, I said absolutely, and tell me where I'm needed, and I go there. So I'm sad to leave my school currently, but I'm very excited to be at my new school, and it'll be the first time I've ever been teaching and or an assistant principal at an elementary school. So for the next 2.5 weeks, I'm working in both buildings. So it's going to be a little, Chris is going to be a little more stressed and a little more tired than usual, but I am excited at the new opportunity.
I still think you need a cape. You're coming in. They've called you in. We need help. Chris, you're the guy for the job. I think you need a cape. I'm just saying, I will die on that hill.
Well, as I posted on Twitter, I'm a big fan of The West Wing, and I posted that GIF from President Bartlett said, "So what do you say? You want to help us out?" And that's basically kind of how I felt with the district office asked me to say, "Hey, can you help us out with this?" And that's basically what I said. I said yes.
So did you just leave that conversation with what's next?
Basically, they're going to hear me say that a lot at the school at that point. So I am a Bartlett stan of epic proportions.
So. Absolutely. Great show. What's next?
So anyways, so that's what I've been hinting towards for the last few weeks. It's officially out there. So yes, in a few weeks I will be now an assistant principal at a local elementary school that I'm very excited about. So but all right, yes, we have new episode. We've got one news item that is a lot to talk about, as you said. So we will get into that. And with this episode, I have a lot to talk about with this episode. So let us get this underway. Seeing the chat. Thank you, Julio. I appreciate it. And Phil in the chat. Oh, our two favorite Marvel fans. Aw, thank you, Phil. All right, so let's get all the show plugs out of the way. We are part of the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network with 7 shows covering the wide range of geek and nerdom. To see the full schedule, check out the show notes below and subscribe to the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network on Twitter at GUAPod Network so you know when all the shows drop. We also have a Patreon, so if you want to throw a couple of shekels our way, we've got 2 tiers. Our $1 tier is our tip jar to say, hey, we think we're doing a good job, and then our $5 tier with ad-free episodes, early access episodes, and Patreon-exclusive shows, including our show, We Can Watch This All Day, the Marvel Alliance MCU Rewatch, looking at all the films in the Infinity Saga, 21 episodes up, Ant-Man and the Wasp is our most recent one. In 2 weeks, we are recording Infinity War, I believe, Brent.
Yep, we are. I've watched it. I am prepared.
I think we're gonna watch it tomorrow night, or you listen to this tonight, because next weekend I was invited to. Interestingly enough, I at the current school I'm at, I was actually a teacher at, and the 10-year reunion for that particular class has invited me and amongst other staff members that had an impact on them to their 10-year reunion. So I will be there Saturday night. So Aaron said we probably need to watch
That's
Infinity
cool.
War this weekend.
I
So
didn't even go to my own 10-year reunion, but I respect you for going to others.
I still haven't gone to any of my reunions either. So this is
That's what Facebook is for. I'm sorry.
that facts there. So, but other things we got on Patreon, we got Joe's doing his 30 plus days of Halloween. So I've been enjoying those. At that point, check those out. We've got the DC Alliance guys doing their DC through the years. Katie's bringing back the Star Wars comic book canon, looking at the Star Wars book. So again, patrons, we cannot do this without your support. We greatly appreciate it. If you're not a member of our Patreon, go to www.patreon.com/GUA network so you can join the Patreon. But if you cannot join, we totally understand. And if you give us 30 to 90 seconds and rate and review the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network and Marvel Solo feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, we greatly appreciate it. And last but certainly not least, we want to thank our official sponsors, OrganicPriceBooks.com, for your omnibus hardcover collected edition needs. JP and the crew at OPB have got it going on with excellent customer service, immaculate packaging, ships around the world. We're talking about Daredevil tonight. You might as well pick up Daredevil by Frank Miller, Omnibus Companion. That's the one that has the Born Again storyline and the Man Without Fear storyline in it at that point. So great thing. You got Captain America Volume 1 coming back into print in Omnibus. Star Wars by Gillen and Pack finally coming out, the second part after Jason Aaron left. So excellent series. How about you use that code MarvelGUA at checkout to get $2 off every single order. It lets them know you're a listener. And we want to thank them for being our official sponsor. All right, I think that is everything out there. And all right, so Loki Season 2, Episode 2, Breaking, if I'm not mistaken,
Breaking Brad.
Breaking Brad, yes, Breaking Brad. We won't make that mistake like Travis made last night, right?
I absolutely read it as Breaking Bad when I looked at it. It wasn't until later that I saw it.
That is a interesting mind-eye trick at that point. So
yeah, it's almost like they did that on purpose.
Yes, very much so. So, non-spoiler thoughts. What you got?
I mean, it was just another great episode of this show, So at this point, we're 7, 8 episodes into the series on the whole, and in this one, we get a little bit more Loki action, and it almost feels like this is the first time mission that Loki is really teaming up with Mobius. Yeah, they were kind of together at the end of season 1, but by the time they were working together, basically it was around the episode 5 time, right? Like they tried stuff before, but Loki was always. He always had another agenda, right? Mm-hmm. His ulterior motives. And this time he was just actively trying to work with Mobius and going so far as to scheme with him to fulfill their objective of finding Sylvie. And I was here for the whole thing.
Yeah, this was, the first episode was great. This one had a lot of character development in different ways. We got really a kind of a great, again, you and I love these kind of quiet moments in the MCU, and another good moment with Loki and Mobius, and getting some depth into kind of Mobius's character, and Mobius getting kind of pushed, and Loki getting pushed by one of the characters in particular. But we're getting kind of a really good idea of kind of where the season's going and kind of the big threat. And again, we still haven't seen Kang or the variants of Kang yet. We've been referring to them, but I'm thinking next episode we finally are going to see Victor Timely.
It does feel like we're really close to that. Any minute we're going to see a version at least of He Who Remains.
Yeah. So, all right. So we're going to pause here, take our first ad break for the evening before we get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen episode 2 of Loki season 2, stop, watch it. Check us out, but if you don't care to be spoiled, all right, we're going to take that first ad break. So, listeners, these ads help keep the lights on in the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't get to choose what ads come on, and they could be a bit loud. Give it that 3 count before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. And we are back. So, all right, so we begin the episode in London, 1977, on the Sacred Timeline. So I like it that when we're going back in fourth right now, they do call out when we're on a branch versus sacred
Yes.
timeline.
And it
So
didn't occur to
that
me till my second watch. Loki has now been on the sacred timeline. This Loki who got
mhm.
plucked away has now gone back to the sacred timeline.
Yeah. And we're at the premiere of what we eventually find out as Hunter X5's Zaniac, who has become a big movie star apparently on the sacred timeline. This was the same year that Star Wars dropped, which meant also 2 years removed from when Jaws dropped and started the whole blockbuster craze. Uh, Loki instantly, though, suspects that Sylvie is not here because remember, in season one, Sylvie was always hiding in apocalypses, and so changing things during an apocalypse or a disaster, it wouldn't make much of a difference since it was being wiped out. And Loki, if you remember, showed that like what happened when he was in Pompeii.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
we do see later Sylvie creating a life for herself on a branch timeline. Now, as Loki and Mobius walk towards the theater, there's an interesting poster there for Kingo, or one of Kingo's new his one of his sons at that point, him playing himself in another movie.
Yeah, him playing himself. So like the version we would have seen in the present day of the Eternals, this would have been like his father, presumably.
I really like that it's still trying to make Eternals a thing, or at
Stop
least
trying to
Kingo
make
a
fetch
thing.
happen. I kind of like it. It's like a running gag to see the Kingo posters and where they're going to pop up. And realistically, I still think Eternals, we will see them again. Like, they
Mhm.
told us we'll see them again. They haven't broken that promise yet. We will eventually when they
Mhm.
decide to follow up on some Phase 4 movies. Hopefully, Shang-Chi's first, but got
Yeah.
to get that.
And so we're at a premiere. The big poster is Zaniac. So Hunter X5 is going under the name of Brad Wolf, who was the alter ego of Zaniac in the comics. That had Brad growing up in a neglected household, but he channeled his negativity becoming an actor. Starring as Zaniac, this was a monster movie that saw him donning a costume like one of the classic monster movies. And so Brad was hoping to kind of be the next new monster movie star. So, however, when he was in costume about to film, an explosion happened, caused him to mutate actually into Zaniac. Acting out of the movie's script in real life, he ended up kidnapping a woman and carrying out mass murder. He was stopped by Thor, and after being subdued, he was arrested and was discovered that in the explosion, he had become possessed by a demonic entity that was controlling him and killing the people. Upon Brad's death, this demon burst forth from his body, and the TVA actually had to go back in time and stop it in the comics. Now, obviously, as we see with this episode, they're not doing that, but I love it that I think it's obviously a very D-list character for Marvel, and then there was like Phone Man. I can't remember, like there was a movie poster by the same production company for like Phone Man.
Yeah, yeah. This is a character that's like even I don't even think Marvel's gonna go to right. Like they're so obscure and out there, and I've seen pictures of him because I've Googled it before. I don't think I've ever read anything with this character in it.
Now we can read it on Marvel Unlimited.
I could. I'm gonna be honest. It's probably not gonna jump to the top of my priority list.
Hmm.
I'm still reading through the Avengers Forever stuff we talked about several weeks ago, but it's there. It's there if I want it.
Well, I mean, even if you remember in the last episode, Hunter X5, there was a lot he's having a lot of popularity now. And you remember when they were revealing like they're all variants and understanding that idea, they were kidnapped basically. A lot of talk that's saying that their lives were taken away and the temptation to go live on. So, he was there to go undercover to take it to capture or find where Sylvie was. He must have found a idea who he was and decided to, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna actually live my best life.
That is exactly what I think happened. I think he went and I think he basically just researched himself, found where he came from,
Hmm.
where the TVA plucked him off of the sacred timeline, and I could just see it as soon as they pull him out, he slid right in there. Time paradoxes. Who would have thought?
Yeah, and he's even rumored to be apparently hooking up with Bridget Bardot, who was a very famous model from the time.
I mean, you do what you gotta do. I'm not judging him.
I see David is also taking my recommendation for Avengers Forever.
Yeah, we talked about it the other day, and I
Nice.
gave him a couple of the concepts, and he said, "Okay, I got to do it."
Yep. So I love it how Mobius is on the press line and asks if there will be a Zodiac 2. In the comics, of course, we never got that one. And what happens here, I don't know if we're going to get that here either.
It'd be fun if they did it though in the future. Like if there was if presume, let's just say there was a Loki season 3. If they ended up in the late 70s, early 80s again, if there was a poster for Zodiac or Zaniac, I mean Zodiac, Zaniac 2, it'd be a fun gag.
I do like how Hunter, X5, Mobius, and Loki kind of play off each other like this is all good. But that was an interesting discussion about like, because it was just weird when how this episode began. It's like I almost felt like time had passed or I'd missed something in the last episode just because I was like, wait a minute, is that Hunter X5? Because there was no kind of, they kind of like expected you to kind of follow along a little quicker than I realized.
And he looked different. I mean, his hair's longer.
Mhm.
Sure, the character, but well, the character and the actor, they could both be wearing wigs, but he still looked different. It did take me a moment to realize that was him. But I enjoyed like I assumed it was gonna. I gotta quit assuming on the show. I assumed it was gonna be one of these situations where they go up to him and he doesn't know who he is as X5. He doesn't remember his time, or it's before his
Yeah.
time as X5. So like the idea of the TVA is completely foreign to him, and instead he's just immediately like, "Oh crap, I gotta go," and he bolts because he does indeed know them.
Mhm. And so yeah, so when he bolts, he's trying to escape at that point, goes 10 pad, but Hunter B-15 ambushes him, grabs the 10 pad, and he takes off. But Loki eventually pins him, but he uses that time twister that we saw in season 1 to get himself out of there. But as he's trying to think he's going to escape, Loki creates an illusion where there's a crowd of people, and when he very similar to what he kind of does in the event in Avengers, he creates that illusion of other people around him, and I love that kind of shadow effect when they kind of they Mobius and Loki are there, and he's against the wall in the shadows. He creates other illusions of himself, but the shadows grow the Loki horns, and they kind of hold him there. It was pretty sinister that we haven't seen kind of Loki doing a little bit.
He kind of showed a couple times throughout this episode. He still has that god of mischief in him. You know, he's not. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like he's Captain America over here. And yes, the shadow play as Mobius called it, that was such a cool use of the powers. Absolutely, it was, and it was just such a great visual with the shadows there pinning him down. The 3 Lokis, and I like that they threw you off because they just make you assume, like most people would assume, the real Loki was in the middle. No, he was off to the
Yep.
side.
Yeah, and Phil agrees. Loved how Loki used the shadow magic to capture X5, and then the shadows from his famous horns. Loved all that, and the CG was really good with it. I mean, it appeared to kind of do. They did a good job with that. Until we cut to the opening, title at that point. I forgot to mention this last week. A friend of the show, Ryan Airy from Screen Crush, pointed out that the title sequence, the titles in the fonts. Every letter comes from a film that featured Loki. The typeface used: Thor, Avengers, Dark World, Ragnarok, and Endgame. The letters signify that we're dealing with a number of different Lokis, but it's all black and white in this world to show that still Loki. So each one of the typefaces are taken from a font from a movie that's featured Loki. That is
Mhm.
impressive work, Ryan.
Yeah, that's a great pull there. I don't think I realized that.
Yeah. Back at the TVA, they notice that X5's temp pad has been modified, and they basically are saying we're going to take it to our man OB to take a look at it. OB's trying to design something to fix the time loom, which which I think is probably going to lead to something else happening maybe next time. And they agree that probably instead of him looking at the temp pad, he needs to be focusing on fixing the time loom. So he hands him the official handbook of the TVA that he himself wrote, and he says all the stuff you will ever need to know about the time pad is right there. And
So he's
because
now given them 2 copies of that book. Copy
yes,
last week, copy this week. I kind of hope that becomes a thing.
yeah, exactly, because he invented the temp pad, you know.
Yep.
And someone who could do this would be extremely so. If he invents almost everything in the TVA, we also know he's he's one of the only ones we can see that has not had their memory wiped. So if he can do all this, he is very, very important king. And he might even have found out a hand. He might have, here's an idea. He could have had some help in designing maybe things that we saw in Quantumania for Kang.
He absolutely could have, and it would be fun, and hopefully we will see this to see what he knows about King, what he knows about He Who Remains.
Yeah, even Andrew's starting to think that. He says, if it just me, or feels like OB could be secretly be involved with Kang. Could be.
I would not rule it out yet. I haven't seen anything that tells me that's a crazy idea. Not yet.
Yeah, and wiping his memory would remove all his knowledge, and therefore it was kept. Thus, he had to be just shuffled out of the way, which is why he is where he is. So that just fixing stuff than being involved in the main issues of the TVA. Did you do? Here's another catch. There was a mini alligator on OB's desk.
I did not see that.
Yeah.
Now I got to go back and look at it.
Little bit of croaky action going on.
I mean, who doesn't appreciate croaky?
Yeah.
And that's good because I don't think we're seeing croaky this
No,
year,
unfortunately. So Hunter B-15 talks with KC, and we get some theories of where Ravonna is, and he confirms that Miss Minutes is down because she has abandoned the TVA and is working with Renslayer.
Yeah, I like how he's like the secret mission to find Renslayer. And she's like, what are you talking about? Secret mission? She's who we're all going after.
Exactly. She put me in darn like TVA prison or time prison for a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So he does discover that Renslayer deleted all the evidence in her temp pad except the last message. And Casey, as Mobius and Loki are having no luck trying to figure out reading and understanding the TVA manual, Casey says, what you got there? And he says, oh, it's a temp pad. Hunter X5 says it can block, tracking of anyone. He's like, no, it doesn't do that. It's modified, but it definitely doesn't do that. And I like how, we first get introduced to Casey in season 1. He kind of looks like it's hard to say like he's kind of like a buffoon in the first season, but he's really just kind of like part of the TVA. But like in just this episode alone, he really stands out as like he knows a lot.
In season 1, he was filler, almost like background filler to just fill out the cubicles, the people who work at the TVA. Mm-hmm. And here they're doing more with him, and that'll make a rewatch of season 1 fun because we're going to know obviously that there is more to this character than what they showed us there. Last week he had a hand in Loki, helping to like Loki figuring out he was bouncing through time, and then of course this week it turns out he's OB's #1 fan and he's read all his work and he's able to help him.
Yeah. So they decide like, let's go interrogate Hunter X5, see what he knows, see if he found Sylvie. And that's going to be interesting just because Hunter X5 was a hunter. He knows their tactics for interrogations. It's not going to necessarily be an easy thing, and he proves it's not going to be easy. X5 keeps telling him his name is Brad and that he's really become attached to that life. He taunts B-15, and then he rips into Loki saying, you're not a hero. You're a villain. You know how many lives you've ruined and killed because of that. He even brings up his mother and how he inadvertently caused her death. But
yeah, that's just cold. That's just cold.
Well, but remember, that Loki never experienced that. He saw it.
He saw it.
Never experienced.
And he knows it was his fault. Or he knows it was a future version of his fault. That's still going to hit pretty close to home.
Oh, yeah. And he pushes Loki to kind of make a move. And then Mobius says, I thought Mobius says to Brad who? That's showbiz.
Yeah, but I did like that we got that big monologue from Loki where it didn't work, but he tried to intimidate him and talk about basically how crazy he could be and how violent he could be. And I was really enjoying it. I'm into it. I'm like, and then at the end, Brad is like, no, like you're not going to do any of that. And I thought that was funny the way it didn't work.
Mm-hmm. And then Mobius says he promises them return to the timeline if he continues to be a star if he just tells them where Sylvie was, tells them what they was doing. And X5 points out again like the fallacy of the TVA and asks like who is really on the timeline. This idea in their head that I'm pretty confident we're going to see where Mobius came from.
I think, well, yeah. I mean, maybe we'll hold on to that thought.
Yeah.
I'll
Uh,
talk about that more later.
but he pushes Mobius to a point where he loses control and even questions who was following who, and he punches X5, and even X5 is taken aback by that.
I mean, it wasn't very tactical. So
No, no, not at all. And they decide to, Loki goes after Mobius, and they decide that he needs to calm down, so they're going to have some key lime pie, which is a personal favorite of mine. So I was kind of jealous.
yeah, and that was one of those great scenes that's just a conversation. It's
Hmm.
just a conversation between the two actors talking. This was definitely one where you could see they weren't actually eating the pie. Like,
Yeah.
actors are never really eating on set, or almost never, and it was noticeable this
Sound
time.
is just bad. You can't even. You
But
don't want that at all.
no, no, no. But this was a great scene, and I loved how Loki got Mobius to open up to him and
Hmm.
admit that he's not really worried if because Mobius is saying he doesn't want to look up what his life was on the sacred timeline. He's not really worried about if he finds something bad. He's worried if he finds something good, because that will make it harder for him to not try and go back to that life when he's still needed at the TVA.
Well, even then, even in the comics, like Mobius, the character is a clone. There's tons of Mobius clones, so it's interesting just because like he's happy with this life. This life is fine for him. He hasn't even knowing that of what everyone's found out. He's like, no, I'm still kind of good here. I like what I do. And to say that someone like it's a joke, that gets him upset because he does feel like he's doing good work, and he just really enjoys it. And I like it how like Loki opens up about his anger and talks about how he invaded New York and then tried to mind stone on Tony. He admits he lost
Yes.
it and tried to kill Tony by throwing him out the window, which happened during Avengers. Also, this is the version of Loki that like this happened like a week ago for him.
Right. This is super recent, but I love the way he just so nonchalantly tells this story as though he's talking about something from 10 years ago in this life lesson that he learned. And yeah, it's like he just did it.
Yeah, and so they have that heart to heart, and they're saying that we get it cleared up that they now know they were kidnapped variants who were drafted into this much the same way as Loki was. And I think what Loki as a whole will do, I think we're gonna see the creation of the TVA and its fall, which we've already seen beginning with the death of He Who Remains. So the beginnings of the TVA are probably gonna be when we meet Victor Timely, probably next episode.
And I kind of assume that OB is going to be involved in that scene as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Cutting to the end of time, you know, looking back at that, would we see where He Who Remains is, knowing that's the end of time? Interesting theory I've seen going around that castle is what remains of the TVA at that point.
Oh, from like an earlier incarnation.
Well, yeah,
Clever.
that's just what's
Clever.
left because they're at the end of time, so that could be what's left.
It's a clever idea. I
Yeah.
can see that.
I mean, we've already seen from the trailers that they're going to be returning to that place. So Mobius is very scared that if he discovers, like you said, good life, he'd want to go back to it. But either way, they realize that X5 found Sylvie. Like he's too good of a hunter not to have done his job originally. And whether Sylvie convinced him to change his ways or whether he saw her being happy and he got that idea, either way, they are convinced that he knows where Sylvie is.
And they're not wrong. It turns out they were right to assume that, because ultimately he was able to take them to her.
Yeah. But we do cut to OB going to the temporal loom where we see it firing up and getting more unstable. The time loom, I'm pretty convinced at this point because we've seen the future. I think all the warnings and the TVA being evacuated, I think we're basically the time loom's going to overload and explode and cause bigger, more catastrophic effects in the multiverse.
Yeah, I kind of was wondering if it would trigger some incursions, like pushing timelines into each other, for
Hmm.
lack of a better descriptor, and actually smashing them into each other at that point. Maybe that's the kind of thing of what we saw with the incursion we saw in Multiverse of Madness. I don't know, but I'm with you. I think we're I don't think Obi is ultimately going to stop what's coming as far as the time limit goes.
Yeah, and the temporal aura is also said to be invalid, so they have to find a way to lock this down and figure this out because now the blast doors won't open either. So Loki and Mobius decide to go back to X5 and they decide to play it the hard way, as they call it, and basically turns into Loki locking them in together and busting out and this temporal uh box, and they just like he's just kind of looking like he's going to crush him at that point, while Mobius is out on the outside said don't do this, when it really was all a game to get Hunter
Yep.
X5 to admit what he found.
And of course, I mean, if you've ever watched TV before, you knew it was a game. Like you knew that's what they were doing. It was just a question of, is X5 going to know that it worked? Is he going to get through, figure out their ruse that they're doing? And ultimately, he wouldn't. It works out. And again, like I really think Loki was going to crush him though if he didn't say so. It was a game in the sense that Mobius was pretending to be locked out. I do think Loki would have gone through with it if he had to.
Yeah. He goes in that villainous side, and so it works really well because they're literally boxing X5 in order to get the answers they need.
Right. Just closing in on him, but like, yeah, literally boxing him in.
So now we cut to B-15 and KC entering the temple loom room, and OB runs up saying, we're all gonna die. Oh, nice to meet you. And KC becomes so infatuated that he's meeting OB, said, can you sign my TVA manual? He's like, oh, sure.
I mean, how many of us wouldn't be excited to meet OB at this point?
True. And he suggests that the blast doors can't open, and he needs the blast doors open, so only two people can open it. He Who Remains, who designed it, and he's dead, as far as we know, or Miss Minutes can override it and do it. And so they need to find Miss Minutes, or they're going to be in some serious trouble.
Yeah, so that question certainly remains: is where exactly is Miss Minutes right now? But we'll find out eventually, I'm sure. It ultimately, though, I do think it's interesting that anybody besides He Who Remains was given the ability to override this. It just seems like something that he would not hand out the keys to the kingdom on.
Yeah. So from here, we cut to the branch timeline in 1982, where we found Sylvie last week, and shows that she's not been here a full year, and I think they do a great job of keeping this in line with McDonald's in the 1980s, where they actually stay on the outside like 40 billion served versus now with 300 billion served. And her coworker also says to try the new chicken nuggets, which was introduced in 1981. We get a couple of lines with Sylvie that she's basically aware of everything. So when I guess that quote unquote manager says, hey, can you restack the straws? And she's like, already did it.
Yeah, she's probably a model employee, I would imagine. Who wouldn't want to have an Asgardian frost giant working for them for you at McDonald's? Word 789, why did she become a McDonald's worker? To pay for all the McDonald's she wanted. She said she wanted everything, right, last week. So I think it's just about getting life experience.
Yeah, she's never experienced something like that. I mean, you look at her name tag; she got like 5 stars on her, so she's probably an employee of like the month there.
Oh, I'm sure. Which big deal. Like,
yeah,
she worked hard for that.
Yeah, X5 is very insistent they get done with this quickly, and they need to get out and leave, because we later found out like he knows what's getting ready to happen. He's very scared about staying here for this long.
He is. I enjoyed that scene with him and Mobius, as Mobius is trying to, just connect with him a little bit, talk to him a little bit about his movie. I believe this is where we get the crack about It's Cinema, which made me laugh quite a bit. But it's fun. But ultimately, he's like, we can't stay here. And I just kind of was going with General Dox is going to attack. That's what I thought was going to happen. Which I guess is technically true. I just wasn't really thinking from the standpoint of they're just going to go in and prune everybody. Like, I know we talked about that possibility, but in this scenario, I thought Dox and company and the other hunters were going to attack, and that is why he wanted to get out, as opposed to, no, they're going to chuck a time bomb at us and they're going to prune everybody.
And so when Sylvie and Loki meet, they have that kind of like connection moment, and she gets on break and they talk, and she points out to Loki that the future is no longer already pre-written with the death of he who remains. Um, and X5 at that point just loses in the parking lot, and Sylvie enchants him to figure out what is going on, and she finds out General Dox's plan. And I love how Sylvie reveals her costume as well, which is changing her clothes from McDonald's uniform and stepping closer to the future version that we saw in the first episode.
Yep. And at this point, it's like, oh, good. She's still rocking the costume. And it's like, are you going to fight Loki right now? Like, are you going to end up attacking him during this scene? Like, the thought crossed my mind. And, you kind of get it. Like, when they last saw each other, from her perspective, she basically sided with he who remains.
Oh, he did,
basically sided with the person responsible for her entire life's trauma. And I get where that would be a contentious relationship.
Yeah. And so once they find out that, like you said, they're going to be not just pruning people, they're getting rid of whole timelines, because General Dox is a true believer in the sense of what the original purpose of the TVA was about. So they enter a massive hall and see hunters basically mass pruning, mass murdering branches and wiping out trillions of lives. So Dox is clearly indoctrinated by this. She also had war medals with the timekeepers' heads on it, so she's dedicated her life to the entire thing. So it speaks to us that some will still continue their life, even though they're shown the wrongs, and highlights the blind faith the TVA had as their leaders. And this was highlighted in the murals last week when we saw like the three timekeepers and all the people kind of bowing before them at that point. So I mean, they're, even despite knowing quote unquote the truth, they're still going to carry out the plan.
Yeah, they're going to go for it, and basically they know the truth. Do they believe it though? Mm-hmm. Right? Like we've certainly seen times when people are presented with objective evidence to prove something and they just ignore it, right? They just they just look the other way, turn a blind eye, because it goes against their personal thoughts. And that's what it feels like General Dox and her I guess sympathizers, that's what it feels like they're doing.
Yeah. And so, I kind of equate like the time, the pruning, the time bombs kind of work kind of like very similar to incursions are getting ready to happen in the MCU. There are ways to avert this by destroying the other world during incursions to pass through the other Earths. Still, though, hitting the Earth that wipes out everything in both time, that's how people like, Old Man Logan came to existence in the future, in the past being a branch. So now if they traveled to 2010 and pruned it from there, it would still continue to wipe out things like Old Man Logan in the future. Right. So how this works is that it's like a ripple effect, in which the explosion starts off from the impact point and then travels forward and backwards through time. Now, say someone pruned on the branch we're now in, technically you from yesterday would be wiped out along with you from today.
Right. And so it feels a lot like what they're doing, like with all of these going through. And, when they go up to her, like when they had basically attacked General Dox, she's basically just like, they're here, go, push them all out, push everything you got. Effectively, she's saying, kill every last person that you can kill.
Mm-hmm. As David said, timeline genocide.
Yep, great way to put it.
So it's Loki and Sylvie fight against Dox, and we're able to stop her from doing any more damage, but they already did a lot. And back at the TV, Hunter, B-15, and Casey and all the rest are watching in horror as all these timelines are being wiped out of existence. And Sylvie's there, as Loki's trying to convince her to stage, saying, TV is terrible. It's rotten inside and out. It's not any better. You can't even stop this, from happening.
Right. Ultimately, it just, how are they going to stop it at this point? And that's like the big question that I want to have. I want to know, like, how is this going to go forward? Is Mobius and B-15 going to take over the TVA? Like, are they going to make? Now, we know there's that other judge. I'm forgetting what her name, Maple, maybe, but the other judge who basically said no more pruning. But I wonder if B-15 and Mobius are going to position themselves into a leadership position throughout the whole TVA.
Yeah, it's gonna be very interesting at that point. I'm trying to find that name. General Docs. Can't find it, so not quick enough. Not gonna have that dead airspace. Um, yeah, it's gonna be interesting with that. And so Sylvie takes off, and I feel that this ending is a very much echoes the way episode 2 of last season, in which Sylvie ended up bombing the TVA in order to create all these timelines.
Yeah. So the question now is, are we going to get follow up on it, or will it be like last season where we have all these time bombs and then we have no clue? Like we never see it. We don't see the impact.
Yeah. And so we leave off with her back in the branch timeline. She's on her truck at the device, holding the device of He Who Remains in her hand. This has appeared in the credits, and it was left on the side of the table at the castle. This is where power derives, and where some people have theorized last season that it was linked in with the device Tony Stark created in Endgame.
Judge Gamble, by the way, not me.
Judge Gamble. There you
It
go.
was Gamble. Yeah.
Way off.
I was wrong. I could not remember what it was. I had to look it up.
But I really want to know. I really want to know what, back in episode 1, General Dax and X5 had that like kind of heart to heart touching moment, touching heads.
I was going to say touching. What? It was awkward, I thought, but yes, they physically were touching.
She said the timekeepers are fake. The warnings were real. We need to find out what happened at the end of time. Find Sylvie. That's a lot there. That okay, we could find Sylvie. We get. But the warnings were real. We need to find out what happened at the end of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope we get some payoff on that one. Phil's asking, I want to know why OB remembers more than everyone else does. I kind of hinted towards an idea of that, Phil, earlier, where I was saying if OB designed all the equipment, including the temp pads in the TVA, for Kang to wipe his memory would be like disastrous for him. So that's why maybe he's stuck basically in the back room of R&D, not being part of the main idea. And so again, him wiping his memory is more strategic for Kang and He Who Remains than anything else.
Yeah, I would go along with that. Word 789 says, why was X5 so reluctant to tell them where Sylvie was? He found a new life and he had no reason to withhold that information from them. And he goes on, Sylvie meant nothing to him. He really had no reason to hold out for her.
I mean, it's a good question, but it was meant maybe just he could just be maniacal in that sense of just to be a pain in the butt.
Or he could have feared that they were going to just, take him back to the TVA, which they did, and not honor any kind of agreement to let him live out life on the sacred timeline, because
bargaining
as
chip.
far as he's concerned, he doesn't want to be back on General Dox's radar. He doesn't want, because he's basically AWOL. And speculating, of course, we don't know. They don't tell us, but ultimately he sees Mobius and Loki as adversaries, and he's not going to work with them.
Yeah. So it's a great idea. Bargaining chip for him to get what he wants. So, but yeah, so we leave off that episode. No post credits this week, and we were basically kind of hinting toward. I think we're going to head to that kind of 1920s esque sequence next episode. I wonder how far. I really hope that we do go back and find out that recording that Loki overheard in the past between Kang, He Who Remains, whoever, and Renslayer.
What's the phrase in storytelling, like Chekhov's gun or something like that? It feels like something that we are going to find out, something that they're going to need to revisit and close that loop.
But yeah, so next week, Loki sees Loki episode 3. Unfortunately, I will not be here for that episode. I don't. I have still have some athletic duties still left in my time. So Travis Hines will be joining you next week for that.
Hines has agreed to come on. It's he's filled in for me several times. It's been a while since he filled in for you. And hey,
Hmm.
he got more than 10 hours notice, unlike a
He,
couple of times ago.
he did, so I appreciate it. But we got one big news item to talk about next, so we're going to take
Yep.
our not a last ad break, our next ad break for the evening. So listeners, these ads keep the lights on in the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't get to choose what ads come on, and they could be a bit loud. Give it that 3 count before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. All right, so big, I consider this a really big kind of expose from Hollywood Reporter in the sense of what's getting ready to happen at Marvel as a result of the WGA agreement, basically doing what amounts to an autopsy report for what's gone quote unquote wrong and right with Disney Plus and the MCU streaming. So coming from the Hollywood Reporter, entitled "Daredevil Hits Reset Button as Marvel Overhauls Its TV Business." So they say it didn't take long to see the problem after Marvel Studios' Daredevil Born Again paused production in mid-June during the writer's strike. Fewer than half the series' 18 episodes had been shot, and it was enough for Marvel executives, including Chief Kevin Feige, to review the footage and come away with a clear assessment. The show wasn't working. So late in September, Marvel quietly let go of head writers Chris Ord and Matt Corman, and also released the directors for the remainder of the season as part of the significant creative reboot of the series. The Hollywood Reporter has learned the studio is now on the hunt for new writers and directors for the project, which stars Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock, the blind lawyer turned superhero. So more than 50. So that's a bombshell right there that we just found out about this, and this is just coming to light. I mean, so Feige and the team reviewed it, didn't like where it's going, and writers are gone, directors are gone. We're going back to the drawing board, kind of.
So many times I've said, referring to things like Patty Jenkins directing Thor: The Dark World, right? Like she was up for that role. Creative differences. She bowed out. They went their separate ways before they got deep into production of the movie. And I've always said that's the time to do that stuff. The same thing with, they cut it a lot closer, but the Edgar Wright and Ant-Man one. That's
Yep.
the time to do that stuff before you do. This is by far, at least as far as we know, the deepest into production they have been. Effectively 4 episodes or close to 4 episodes worth of formula. Yes, David in the chat, they are going back to formula. I'm not happy this is happening, right? But either way, if this comes out or if they just keep going forward, the show they were making was the show they were making. And if Feige and the rest of the Marvel Studios Parliament isn't happy with it, I'm glad they're not releasing it. Yeah. I don't want they're putting significant money into this, and I'm sure they'll be able to reuse some of it, some of the scenes, some parts of episodes. Of course they will. Some of the scripts, some of the storyline will, I presume, will persist,
Yeah.
But my thing is, I like that they're willing to say, no, this isn't working. We need to start it back over. Just look at things fresh. Let's get a new team on. Should they have come to the conclusion that before they started shooting that significant things like not seeing Daredevil in costume for until the 4th episode maybe wasn't the way to go? Yeah, I think that should have probably come up before they started shooting. But some of that might also be their process where they don't, and we'll talk about this, they don't make these shows like a traditional TV show. They may not have had as many scripts in advance as other shows might. They may not have had the overall to that detailed story points. I will wait for Daredevil. Right? Yeah. I will wait for Daredevil. Once it's out, it's not like they can go back and just suddenly remake it and make it a lot better. No, it's out. It's out. And sure, they edit little things like the Statue of Liberty and Miss Marvel. Yeah, Miss Marvel. But they're not going to do significant story things once the project is actually out. I will wait as long as it takes. This project is too important to me. It's basically the project I'm the most excited for right now that doesn't have Spider-Man in the name, like a potential Spider-Man 4. It's not fair to include Spider-Man in those conversations.
I mean, they've had 50 hours of TV programming starting from the ground up in pandemic. I mean, they basically, Marvel Studios went against the whole traditional TV model. It didn't commission pilots. It instead shot entire series for $150 million plus on the fly. It didn't hire showrunners, but instead depended on the film executives to run the series. And again, film is it seems like a dur kind of thing. Doing film, doing TV, huge difference. It is there are certain things, and that's why a lot of people kind of like either criticized or made fun of like these shows basically seem like movies just cut up into 6 pieces.
And I'm not going to be one of these people. I'm not going to join the chorus of people saying, see, look, it was garbage from the beginning. They didn't know what they were doing. They're just making long movies. It's movie people trying to make TV, and it's different. There's truth to that, but they also gave us Loki, right? We got WandaVision out of this stuff. We got Falcon and Winter Soldier, which is a show that I loved, and I know that's one that people cite. People cite that as this could have just been one long movie, and I'm still not entirely convinced with that. I accept that people feel that way, but you add in that we She-Hulk and Moon Knight, like we've got all these Ms. Marvel, these shows that I genuinely enjoyed. Not Secret Invasion, not you, but all these different things, and it's just. I'm not willing to say like there was no value or no reason for them to try it this way, but I appreciate that they are willing to say it's not working anymore. What we were doing was not sustainable. We've how many times have we said the pace they were at was not sustainable on the show? And now they're getting to a point where the pace they're at, they can't maintain. I mean, call it what it is. They're in their eyes, they can't maintain the quality. I feel like we can say that pretty safely, considering they're rebooting Daredevil, right? Like they're starting it over. That says from their eyes, they could not maintain the quality, and I'm glad they're taking steps to fix that.
Yeah. Brad Winderbrom, Marvel's head of streaming, said, "We're trying to marry the Marvel culture with the traditional TV culture. Television and animation, it comes down to how we can tell stories in television that honor what's so great about the source material." So with Daredevil, sources tell them that Corman and Ord crafted a legal procedural that did not resemble the Netflix version, known for its action and violence. Cox didn't even show up in costume, as you said, Brent, until the 4th episode. Marvel, after greenlighting the concept, found itself needing to rethink the original intention of the show. Marvel plans to keep some scenes and episodes, though other serialized elements will be injected, with Corman and Ord becoming executive producers on the season 2. So,
which is a contractual thing. Like they don't.
It is. It is at that point. You know, we got into a discussion in our GUA when the story in GUA chat when the story broke that the idea. I'm not going to go, this isn't a good look period of what's happening in the sense of it's like they have to scrap this. And then we find, we'll go into more of the stuff that kind of tea got spilled in this article as well. But I understand where Travis Snell is coming from when he says, if this is, it's all gearing towards, we're not seeing the Daredevil in costume until the 4th episode. That's the biggest thing wrong with the show. No, that's kind of the big shock moment. Like the general audience, okay, they quote unquote saw Daredevil in his yellow costume in She-Hulk if they even watched it. But when you have a recognizable character that was established in Netflix and not having him appear in any sort of costume until episode 4, there's a lot of spotlights on this, and there was a lot of worry already amongst some of the fans saying, oh, it's going to Disneyfy, it's not going to do it. I have no problem with a good legal procedural. There's a good balance, and the comics do find a balance to do that with Matt and this. I understand, from what I understand about what the show's doing, that Matt may be walking away in the beginning because of something that might have happened to focus more on law than putting away the Daredevil costume and being called back in. That would be kind of, I don't think that would garner the fans to come back, and then it would be like, we've already seen what happens to sometimes. If you don't hit it out of the park in first 2 episodes at that point, then nobody's going to pay attention.
What was one of the biggest complaints, especially related to seasons 1 and 3 of the Daredevil show on Netflix?
Oh yeah, where is he? He's not in the red suit.
Where's the red suit? Yes, he was in a costume, but it was it was the Walmart version of the costume, right? Like it was the Superboy t-shirt and jeans costume.
It's the man without fear suit.
Right. It wasn't the real costume. It was proto Daredevil, basically. Yeah. You can make an argument he doesn't truly become Daredevil until the final episode of season 1 when he dons the costume and he stands there over Kingpin and takes him down. For them to have 3 seasons of a beloved version of the show, of the character, I mean, and they're bringing back the same actor, and we've already seen a costume for him that is modeled after the Netflix version, different color scheme, of course. But if you look at them side by side, they are very similar costumes. They're clearly modeled after it. To throw that away effectively and not show it for 4 episodes, I absolutely think is a mistake. The only scenario in which I think that works is if the first 2 weeks you do 2 episodes each time.
Yeah.
Or 3 in 1 or something like that. You can't make people wait a month long to see a actor that is a beloved actor playing a beloved part, not in the realized part. Like it's way too long. And is that a signifier of that's all that's wrong with it? No, that's just one example to give. I guarantee you they didn't throw him out, throw out these directors and writers and say, you don't have Matt Murdock in the costume, so we're starting over. They're not going to do that.
They saw that in the scripts at that point. So they get, it's an expensive thing. Let's give it a shot. That's a lot of money to throw away.
I do think they should have squashed that before they shot those scripts, but they still had time to shoot scenes to put back in those episodes if they wanted. Yeah. And I do want to mention, just in case everyone's not clear, this piece does have quotes, like you just said, from Brad Winderbaum. He is part of the Marvel Studios Parliament. And if you're not sure what that means, basically there's Feige and the Parliament, and then everybody else is under them. He is one of the top people. That doesn't mean this piece is 100% accurate. Obviously, some of this is going to be from THR sources, but from Boris Kit, right? From Boris Kit sources. Mm-hmm. But you take the credibility of just Kit's name to begin with, combined with there is legitimacy here. At least some of this is, and probably a significant amount is accurate. I do pretty much take this entire piece at its word. And I think as soon as I saw that they had somebody from the Parliament in it, I'm like, all right, this is giving this piece a lot of credibility here.
Yeah. There are sources, speaking of unnamed sources, the sources tell them, like, those who work with Marvel on TV side have complained a lack of central vision, and according to sources, began to afflict the show's creative differences and create a lot of tension. So this is where they start getting into a lot of the tea being spilled. So starting with Moon Knight. Show creator and writer Jeremy Slater quit, and director Mohamed Diab took over the reins. Jessica Gao developed and wrote She-Hulk Attorney at Law, but then was sidelined once the director Kat Cario came on board. Production was challenging, with COVID hitting the cast and crew, and Gao was brought back to oversee the production, a typical showrunner duty, but that was very rare. The Marvel head writer who has such oversight. That just didn't happen. And so another source said the whole fix it and post attitude makes it feel like the director doesn't matter sometimes, says one person familiar with the process. As shows ramped up during the pandemic, Marvel stepped outside its usual staffing approach and brought in outside execs after years of internally promoting creatives who had been sufficiently trained by the Marvel method. It gets into Secret Invasion. Kyle Bradstreet, a writer and executive producer on the USA Network Emmy Award-winning Mr. Robot, had been working on the script for Secret Invasion for about a year when he was fired after Marvel decided on a different direction. And her new writer, Brian Tucker, who penned the crime thriller Broken City, Thomas Bazooka, who had helmed the thriller Let Him Go, and Ali Selman, who'd worked on Hulu's 9/11 drama The Looming Tower, were brought on board to help crack the story. And then in the summer 2022, this debilitated the production process as factions became entrenched, with the leaders vying for supremacy during Secret Invasion's pre-production in London. That it was weeks of people not getting along, and it erupted. Marvel declined to obviously directly comment on the matter. And it gets even worse. The company dispatched Jonathan Schwartz, a senior executive and member of Marvel's creative steering committee, known as you said, the Parliament, to get Secret Invasion back on track when it was falling behind on schedule and on the verge of losing actors because of other commitments. By early September, a good portion of Invasion team had been replaced with new line producers, unit production managers, and assistant directors. And Bazooka, who was supposed to direct 3 episodes, left the show because of the new scheduling conflicts. Marvel executives overseeing the show, Chris Gary, was reassigned and, according to the source, is expected to depart Marvel when his contract is up. Wow. Knowing all this, it now even shows even more clearer why Secret Invasion became a big mess towards the end.
Yeah, and I maintain Secret Invasion episodes 1 through 5, content's either good or content was great. I was with them. They just shit the bed on episode 6. I'm sorry, there's no nice way to put it. Just incredibly disappointing. But it's, I mean, this shows it, and we can put part of the blame at least on Bob Chapek and the amount that he was pushing for what we've learned for content to come out. And that's why we got 18 projects in 2 years. But the whole thing may not entirely have been Kevin Feige's fault, but it is absolutely his problem to deal with. And while it does stink that, Secret Invasion was basically a casualty of this, I am glad that they are taking steps to try and minimize the damage going forward.
And Julio's exactly right. I agree with you. Yes, the WGA contract is forcing Marvel. I think it is forcing them to do some things that
it's in the contract.
Yeah, it's in it, but it's also showing like this has not worked for a number of projects, and it's getting messy, and it's costing them viewers, and it's costing them. It's ruining the brand.
I'm pretty sure that the new WGA contract did basically include stuff about the showrunner. I need to look it up. But so yes, I do think that's part of it. Does that mean they weren't already going to go along this route? I wouldn't be surprised if they were, but regardless, I don't think they have a choice now to have that. That said, they don't necessarily, even though they're going to have a showrunner, they don't necessarily have to do other things they're planning on doing, like shooting for more serialized storytelling, more multi-season stories versus series events, as they called them back in 2019 when these were all announced. So not all of these changes are from the new WGA contract, but whether or not they were already planning this, they don't have a choice. My understanding is they don't have a choice now with the showrunners, which overall I think is a good thing.
Yeah, so the article breaks down some immediate changes that are taking place effective immediately. It now has Marvel Studios now has plans to hire showrunners, as we said, as part of the WGA agreement. Gal's post-production work on She-Hulk helped Marvel see that it would be helpful for its shows to have a creative through line from start to finish. It was a term we've only now grown comfortable with, but also learned to embrace, says Winterbaum. Next, the studio also plans to having a full-time TV execs rather than having executives straddle both television and film. He continues in saying, we need executives that are dedicated to this medium and that are going to focus on streaming, focus on television, because they are two different forms. Next, it is also revamping its development process. Showrunners will write pilots and show Bibles. The days of Marvel shooting an entire series from She-Hulk to Secret Invasion, then looking at what's working, what's not, are done. Thank goodness.
Yeah, I don't think there's any negative to that. And again, it takes a lot to admit, like, we tried this, it's not working to the way, maybe it worked a few times, but it's not working every time. So, we got to change it. And if you think about it, like, if the order of these shows if the shows had come out exactly as they are, but the order had been different, say Secret Invasion came out like second or third in the place of Falcon and Winter Soldier or Loki, they may have done things differently. But when you had massive hits with Wanda and Loki and pretty well reviewed Falcon and Winter Soldier in the middle there, and then what was after that? You had What If and Hawkeye, right? I feel like I'm forgetting something. When you have like the overall positive reviews that those series gave you, that does, I mean, there's a reason they continued that route. There's a reason that they continued to do that. But if they had had a Secret Invasion early on, maybe they would have been more likely at that point to do something different.
Julio's saying, why are pilots so important in television? Pilots are, I'm not trying to be glib about it. It's like pilots are proof of concept. Yeah, and so basically, what people may not know, like when you go to the Emmy Awards and a lot of that, it's not for the series. It's for one episode. They submit an episode to be considered for every category. It's not an entire season. So typically, if you're in your first season, that the pilot is usually thought of as your best episode because you are trying to sell this and you're going to put everything that you consider. So again, that's what's so important about it. It is proof of concept. If
you look at TV shows like, let's stay in the superhero space. You look at the CW TV shows. A lot of times the pilots for those shows like Arrow, The Flash, Smallville, they have bigger budgets. They have more money because it's proof of concept. And that pilot is what potentially gets a whole series order for a full season or a partial season. sometimes the pilots come out and they're like, okay, we like the show, but we need to make some changes. So the pilot it becomes not the first official episode of the show.
Mhm.
Other times, the pilot, they're like, nope, this is great. We're going forward. And episode 1 is called pilot.
Yep.
The Big Bang Theory. I know for whatever reason people still have problems with that. Great show. I don't care. I'll say it every time. The first episode of The Big Bang Theory that actually aired, the first episode, if you buy the season digitally or you're watching it on whatever streamer has it today, is not the pilot. The pilot came out and there was a different love interest for Leonard. The girl across the hall was played by someone else. It wasn't Kaylee Cuoco. And so they ultimately was like, and if you've never seen it and you're a fan of The Big Bang Theory, I think it's on YouTube. You should look it up. Sheldon was very different. Like there's a lot of perverted. He was straight up perverted. If you watch the show, you know that's not his character, right? So they did the pilot and they're like, we like these elements, we want to change these elements, and they changed them. And that's what pilots are used for. So if they're writing pilots and stuff, basically they're saying, give us a treatment, give us a script, and we're going to look at it from there and decide whether or not to move forward. The only question I have now is, and this article doesn't say, are they going to actually produce the pilots? Are they going to cast your characters, hire directors, create the thing, and then come back and say, no, I don't think they will. I think if they get to the shooting stage, they're still going to go to the series. But we'll see. It could also be that's the plan today, but in 2 years, we'll be talking about how they're going more traditional pilots seasons to begin.
Yeah. One of the big things I'm also really happy about is this. The studio plans on leaning into the idea of multi-season serialized TV, stepping away from the limited series format that has defined it. Marvel wants to create shows that run several seasons, where characters can take the time to develop relationship with the audience rather than feeling as if there were as setup for another big crossover event. Winterbomb says he wants people to watch the shows because they love the characters. It should work, he says, beyond the fact that it ties into other project, or if they're going to be in a movie, or if it's setting up another Avengers film. So what I worry about with this, and a lot of us worry about, is just like what's left on the table that we haven't seen yet, that's from the now quote unquote before the change that's going on. Echo still being released all episodes at that point. It's unfortunate at that point. We have Wonder Man that was paused because of the writer's strike, meant to be a behind the scenes look at Hollywood. We also have Ironheart that was paused indefinitely, that finished principal photography but had not done reshoots. And I had done a Fact or Fiction about like that is going to be paused until they get Armor Wars up and running in a more to kind of start pairing that together a little bit closer. But it's the stuff that's not, that we haven't seen yet, that's already basically or close to being in the canon ready. They've almost got to, it's going to feel like, especially I'm really worried about Echo. It's just like it's going to damage characters that could have had a better shot, and people are just going to be forgetting about them or make them a joke.
So DC Outlaw had sent in a question asking if basically this treatment that Daredevil's getting would affect these other shows, Echo, Ironheart, etc. I think with Ironheart, yes. I actually think that the reshoots, eventually it'll come out that they redid. I mean, reshoots, there's reshoots and there's additional photography. And people often say both names and they're not meant to be the same thing. I have a feeling that additional photography is already scheduled and they're going to do it. Yeah. And that they will, I mean, we know it's been talked about, but I think that some true reshoots will also happen most likely. As far as Echo goes, it's a little tougher to say. I'm not as worried in the standpoint of it wasn't the same writers and directors. So from that point, it wasn't the same people doing it. So, the show could be completely fine. On the other hand, they are doing the binge drop. We don't know why. There's been no explanation for why. Eventually there will be. And if it's as simple as it serves the story better, or the story is more, it's just a better watch in a binge form, fine, I will accept that. Of course, we'll watch it ourselves and then we'll judge for ourselves. Yeah. But the part with Echo that gives me pause is while the writers and directors may not be the same, the characters are definitely going to have more ties because Echo is essentially a Daredevil character, at least in the comics. And obviously, she's going to have ties to both Daredevil and Kingpin.
We know Charlie Cox
Daredevil.
and Vincent D'Onofrio are both going to be in this.
Exactly. And so at this point, keep with the Big Bang Theory references, I guess it's Schrodinger's TV show, right? Echo is Schrodinger's cat in this case because it was produced under it's finished, like it's done. It was originally coming out next month. It was produced under the same situation that gave us WandaVision, Loki, Secret Invasion, and led to Daredevil getting scrapped and started over. Where is Echo in that continuum? We don't know. And so that I think it is a reasonable question. And I know Snell was asking that. I think it's a fair question to ask. Do I still have faith right now? Of course I do, because there's been truly one episode that I thought this is garbage. One episode out of all the hours of content they've given me. And if that's the case, their hit ratio is still awfully good. So yes, I have faith, but I would be wrong to just say, no, it'll be fine because all the others were fine, right? Like, no, they weren't all perfect. Other movies had their problems. Where are we? Are we WandaVision or are we Secret Invasion? Where are we with Echo? If we're somewhere in the middle and we're getting Ms. Marvel and Moon Knight, I'll take it.
All in the game saying they need a couple of seasoned TV execs to help guide the new process with all the experience. I mean, that's what I'm gathering.
I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Apple TV did that. Don't look it up. But the very first things that Apple put out for television is pure trash. There's no getting around it. Then they hired some TV execs and movie execs.
What do you define as pure trash? I'm curious.
Like Battle of the Apps or Planet of the Apps or whatever they called it. Okay. It was the stuff they put out before the morning show. Like when the morning show started, that's when they started getting like actual seasoned TV and film executives. I want to say they hired some former people from Sony, but I could be wrong about that.
That was like saying, man, like you're right. The morning show, then For All Mankind, it's getting ready to do its fourth season in November. At that point, you're right. There was a turning point for them.
It might have been called Planet of the Apps, Battle of the, something like that.
Yeah.
Just don't. Just take me. Just if you've ever trusted me, trust me on this. Don't bother with it. But my point is Apple figured out quickly, we need to hire people who this is what they do. We can't shoehorn it. Now, they were trying to take technology people into TV, which is a much bigger jump than film producers into TV. Mm-hmm. But at this point, Marvel has proven they need to do work on both. They need to separate it out. They talk about it in this. They need to do both.
Brent, I know you can get the Cliff Notes version of that.
Why was Marvel Television folded in Marvel Studios? Where do we begin? Super short version. Marvel's Television was its own separate entity in the Disney org chart. You basically had the CEO. I'm forgetting the name of the guy directly under him, and then who Kevin Feige reported to. And Kevin Feige for a while was a part of Marvel Entertainment, and it reported to Ike Perlmutter. And when Feige got split out, Perlmutter had Jeff Loeb. Jeff Loeb was sort of like the Feige of Marvel TV, and they were separate there. However he left, because it's up for debate, who cares, he's gone. When Ike Perlmutter left Marvel, they reworked it all and moved all the creative side under Feige at that point. So at that point, he got the TV stuff back. Why was Marvel Television folded into Marvel Studios?
Synergy.
A dumb word, but yeah, synergy. Studio synergy. They wanted to have the connections. Yes, it's all connected. Blah blah blah. We could have that debate with Shield and the Inhumans and all that stuff, but it wasn't really. Even if it was on paper, it wasn't practically. Mm-hmm. They wanted the stuff like what we've got now with characters like Wanda in WandaVision or Kamala and Miss Marvel going to the Marvels, where it truly was all connected. And that just wasn't going to happen when they were not all reporting to the same people.
Yeah. So very good job, Cliff Notes version. I just know you've talked about it before on Fans Without Borders and everything like that. So I know you would have the quickest way to do it.
I have very strong opinions about whether or not it's all canon. So and not to say it's not great. If you haven't seen it, go watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'll just leave it at that. But no, it's not canon. Not yet anyway. Maybe someday.
But all right, well, like I said, it's we've been struggling for some news like this, and it's nice to have like kind of Hollywood Reporter giving us like a lot to chew on with this. So again, I'm with you, Brent. I agree. Them pausing it, I hate that they threw a lot of money at this. I know they're going to salvage a couple of things from it, storyline beats, things like that. But I'd rather them pause, restart, get it right under this new direction because it sounds a lot better for the future than what they were doing right now.
And to be clear, like there were some like there was a alleged leaked like overall general synopsis of what was coming out.
Yep.
There was stuff that sounded good. So it's like I
Yeah.
don't want them to throw this all away. There was stuff that sounded good.
I think there is a good balance. You could have a Daredevil show with that balance of hero costume and Matt Murdock in the room. There was a reason. I'm not going to say it here because I don't want to spoil anything for those that don't want to, but there was a reason why Matt Murdock was not going to be in costume until episode 4. There is a very direct reason.
And I will say this, I didn't like the reason. I don't
didn't
like
either.
the way it was going to happen. And I am hoping that this goes so far as to go do a complete 180 and potentially leads to if you know what we're talking about, and sorry we're being purposely vague because it is super spoilery if they keep it, but I'm hoping they do a complete 180 on this and go the other direction on that particular element. But other elements sounded great, and I'm like, yes, just keep going that way.
If you're curious, feel free to DM me. I'll let you know, but it is super spoiler, and it has divided the fan base a lot, if you know what it is.
For sure.
But all right, so we're going to close out news. So we're going to take our final ad break for the evening before we get in feedback, Factor Fictions, and Comic Book Club. So listeners, again, as always, these ads help keep the lights on in the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't get to choose what ads come on, and they can be a bit loud. Give it that 3 count before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. And we are back. All right. Brent, you always put out the Spidey signal. What do we got for questions this week?
Yeah, we did the one from DC Outlaw earlier, but let's go ahead and let's take a couple others that came in from Omari Daniels. What are your expectations for the Punisher in Daredevil Born Again? I hope we get at least one scene between Frank and Matt on the level of their rooftop argument in New York's finest.
Can't protect your women, Red. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm confused. I'm confusing Walking Dead and Daredevil. Sorry.
Right. Some of the rumors that were coming out, stuff that I liked, involved the Punisher and involved things that they were going to do with him. And I love the idea of him coming back. I want to see him in Daredevil. Well, frankly, I want to see them at odds. I love it when those two are at odds. It's so great to see them at odds. Do I think they can give us another scene on the level of that rooftop scene in Daredevil season 2? I don't know. I don't know if they can get to that caliber, but I want them to shoot for it. I want them to try, because even if they're, in the same league as it'll absolutely be super compelling and fun to watch. But I also want to see that team up. We never got a great team up with the two of them. Little bits and pieces, but I would love to see the two of them just throwing down with a whole bunch of random thugs they can just take out. And, there's that one scene in Daredevil where Daredevil is actually actively stops the Punisher from killing a couple people. I want more of that. Call me greedy, but I want more.
I would love the scene that I always point to the episode that Travis and I did looking at, how the Punisher is still relevant and how Marvel can retake it at that point. There's a great scene, and people always talk about it, but I think it's one of the best scenes that Punisher could do, in the sense of the police using the Punisher logo, and he goes up to them and basically takes it and tears it off, saying, you don't get to use my logo. You are meant to be better than that. My symbol is for me. I know what I am, and I know what I'm doing is necessarily not looked upon in a good way in society, but that's who I am. Be better than that, and if I catch you wearing it, you're not going to like the result. I want a scene like that in the show.
Is that the same scene in the comics when he tells him basically you should be emulating Captain America, not me?
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm with you. Give me something along those lines. Absolutely.
Because that is a way that the MCU Marvel can retake the Punisher symbol and bring light to what it is at that point. Acknowledging what Frank Castle does is very wrong, but and unacknowledging him as a character, but also saying like there's a difference between what this symbol is and how it's being purposely taken by the wrong people.
And John Berthal was, if you're new to the show, he was the third person in the Netflix cast that I most wanted to be brought over behind Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio. He was my third. You give me those three, I will complain no further. I'm into it. Yes, I would love all of them, but he's the next one I want. I hope that this retooling of Daredevil Born Again doesn't take him from say he was going to be in 4 episodes, take it down to 2. Right? Like, I hope it's not something like that. No clue how long he's going to be in it, but I really, really hope that he still has a fairly sizable part in the show.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it was a miracle we never thought we'd see coming in the Disney era. So, all right, what you got next?
From Unfiltered, it says, in your opinions, why do you guys think that there's been absolutely no word on the status of Spider-Man 4 featuring Tom Holland? The strikes aside, do you think they're trying to figure out where it will land on the release timeline, contract negotiations, etc.?
I think that Spider-Man's. I think you're on the right track, Phil, with some of that. I think Spider-Man 4. I think it's foregone conclusion going to happen. I think it is a end of Phase 5, beginning of Phase 6 project, and they're still, now that the writers are back together, I think that there's, as we just talked about last week, how X-Men writers, I think they're going to go back to the well of projects they knew are going to be successful, projects they know people want and want to hear. I think we're going to see, I don't see until sometime next year an official word on Spider-Man 4.
So it's important to know, like, there's been no official announcements.
Correct.
But Kevin Feige himself has said it's being worked on.
Yep.
And Sony execs, I think it was Amy Pascal. Okay, she's not technically a Sony exec, but she's contracted by them. She represents them in the case of Spider-Man. I believe she has also referenced it. There's been no announcements, but we know the movie is being worked on. It's not past the point where it's like it's technically not a done deal. Things could fall apart. We know that, but it's gonna happen, right? Yeah. Like, this partnership between these two studios has been too lucrative for both of them to go, and it's kind of been proven. Like, the outside, the Venom movies, like the Sony tried to make Morbin Time a thing, and like it kind of got embarrassed twice with the re-release, right? And
Morbin Time is still a thing.
Morbin Time's a thing, but they got embarrassed because it didn't make any money, and then basically they got convinced Morbin Time was a thing, and they released it again.
I believe that for a second. I do. Don't.
And the thing is, they, at this point, both of these can use Spider-Man, right? Like, Sony has to have Spider-Man connections. They literally have no choice. Marvel can go on without him, but they are better with him. They are absolutely better with him. I don't think anybody would argue that. And so it's going to happen. It's just a patience game. And that's why it's like, of the stuff like this coming, like Daredevil is the one that I'm got my eyes on. But the moment there's that Spider-Man announcement, obviously, that's it. Like, that's Spider-Man. It's my favorite character. So it is going to happen. And I'm still holding out hope that it's going to be a little bit of a crossover between those two.
Yeah. So any more questions? Because I want to make sure that All in the Game's got a good question.
No, go with the chat.
Okay. All in the Game asked, heard about some of the announced projects being scrapped, like Wonder Man show. I will point to Marvel's track record. They have not canceled outright and scrapped an entire project. They have repurposed, but they have not outright canceled a project. Inhumans got moved to a very unfortunate TV show, and now Armor Wars has moved from a show to now a movie. Wonder Man, they were already beginning it. I mean, you've got a star talent in Yaya. He is a proven commodity. He is a great actor. I like the idea. They have plenty of time in reflecting on this to retool, and I hope that this is part of the retooling going on, because they did not get too far in production with it. They were getting ready. I think they were just starting a couple of days into filming before they shut down.
I'll say this. Since this THR article dropped, I've seen fans speculate that Wonder Man could get cut. I haven't seen any credible sources say anything about Wonder Man getting cut. They've acknowledged its existence. Marvel, for the record, has never officially announced it, but they've acknowledged its existence. At least I don't think they've officially announced it. I'm not questioning myself.
Basically, either Deadline, Hollywood Reporter
But
reporting.
I think it was all trades that reported it. So, so yeah, like Marvel's announced what they've truly announced ratio is still there. I feel like the worst case scenario is they're not that deep into it and they're going to retool it under the current guidelines. And some of it I think they have to, because I think when they go back into production, the contract is what it is, and I think they're going to have to adjust some of this stuff for it.
Yeah, and good. And again, if it falls under a better shot, I like the concept of what it was trying to do, particularly because, again, I thought She-Hulk was a great idea, that proof of concept that they could do something like a comedy in the sense of that kind of idea of like going behind the scenes of a superhero in Hollywood. I think I think that could be really funny.
Yeah, and I'm still hoping. I hope we get more. I hope we get. I still think Miss Marvel is the most likely to get a season 2. I hope there is a She-Hulk season 2. I think there is value in that story, value in that character, and it's different. It's fun. And I want more of it.
Yeah. So, all right. That all the questions we got?
Yep, that's it.
All right. So, thank you all. Appreciate the questions. So, let me get into Fact or Fiction from last week. And Brent's up, and it's going to be a Brent and Chris combo.
Yeah, it's more of a mix this week, because you had one you wanted to get in. I had two that I liked, and there's the third one that I just was like, I'm not feeling this one. I don't really want to do this one. So, we'll tag team it. First up, Mobius will go back.
We got to do last week's.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So last week, number 1, Wolverine will not be on the first incarnation of the MCU X-Men team, and I just realized I spelled first incantation, and people at least understood that. So one day I'll spell pretty one day. Fact: 79% say Wolverine will not be on the team in the first incarnation, and 21% said fiction. Let's see, number 2, if I can find it. I've got to find number 2, because I've got number 3, I've got number 4.
Uh-oh.
No, you gotta love this at that point, because I know I had 2 on there. Oh well. Maybe I'll find it.
Why don't you go ahead and do number 3?
Yeah, go number 3. The X-Men will have a crossover movie with the Avengers. 74% said fact, 26% said fiction. Number 4 is Loki season 3 is happening. Fact: 63% said fact, 37% said fiction. Let me quickly go to our.
I got number 2.
You got number 2. Thank you.
Yep. Number 2, the first X-Men team will have one new mutant that has never been featured on screen, but has been in the comics prominently in recent years. 84% fact.
Okay.
One new X-Men member is coming. The audience says so. So there it is.
There we go. All right, Brent. What are your first 2?
Mobius will go back to his real life by the end of season 2. And I'm going to add, just to clarify, he's going to leave the TVA. He's going back home.
Say that one more time.
Mobius will, let me phrase it this way. Mobius will leave the TVA and go back to his real life by the end of this current season.
I say fiction. I'm a pretty hard fiction on that one.
When I originally came up with this, I didn't have the by the end of season 2 on there. And I was a pretty firm fact that by the end of the Loki show. I'm not 100% convinced that we are getting a Loki season 3. I'm not 100% convinced that we're not. I think it's still up in the air. I think he eventually will go back to his timeline. I do. I struggle with the by the end of season 2, and that's why I put it there. I wanted to make it hard, right? Like I told you I wasn't sure of my answers. I'm going to go ahead and say fact just to play the other side of it, because I think he will eventually do it. I'm just not convinced I'm truly not convinced it'll be that fast.
Yeah, I think that he may be tempted by it, but I think, again, I'll stick with what I said earlier. He is convinced the TVA can do some good.
Yes. I also thought making it he'll visit and see what it was too easy, because I think that's going to happen.
Oh yeah, that's low hanging fruit.
So I was trying to make it a little harder on myself.
Yeah, you did.
Next up, Miss Minutes will not be seen in Loki season 2 until episode 4 at the earliest. I guess another way I could say it is that we're not seeing Miss Minutes next week.
Oh, we're not seeing her next week?
Next week's episode 3. I'm saying we won't get
Okay.
her until episode 4 at the earliest. I really think it's going to be 5, but
Oh,
I
don't
think
hit no.
I'm just telling you what I really think it's
Yep.
going to be.
Okay.
Watch me be wrong, and then open
That's
with
fun.
like they're going to open with Miss Minutes like popping up on the camera and just saying
Ah!
hello like she did at the start of episode 6 in season 1. But
For those of you that aren't watching the YouTube, Brett has a lovely Miss Minutes little figurine that, as he said, pop up on the screen, and he shoved it right in the front of the camera. So
that's true. I did do that, and I just knocked its leg off again, so I got to fix
oh
that.
no.
But it's all right. Not the first time. It won't be the last.
Yep.
But Miss Minutes will not be in episode 3 of Loki.
And I'm gonna go fiction again.
I think it's fact. We know they're looking for her. I just don't think they're going to find her that fast.
Okay. All right. So I will take on number 3 for this week because I'm worried that it's going to possibly become more and more as an idea that could happen. At the end of Loki season 2, Loki will take the position of He Who Remains. You're muted.
What was the name of when Nick Fury became like this cosmic Overwatcher thing?
He
And
became the Watcher.
was it the Watcher that he was? He tried to have Bucky do it for a little while, right?
Yeah, he had the Watcher's eye, basically.
Like that's what you just gave me vibes of. Like Loki taking on He Who Remains.
And so the reason I'm saying this in the past 2 episodes, and this episode really brought it true, is like he buys into what He Who Remains was doing. He said it may have been like did it in not the best way, but his idea of holding a single timeline together is every time he mentions He Who Remains, there's a little more deference to how Loki talks about him.
See, and I think I'm going to say fiction because I think David in the chat, Fallout of Original Sin. Thank you, because I was trying to remember that story. I'm going to say fiction because I think it's less that he's thinking Loki. I think he acknowledges He Who Remained might be right, and more that he's just like, what was it he said in the first episode? He can back up the title He Who Remains. I still think he's just afraid of him.
I mean, I think he's afraid. I don't think he's afraid of He Who Remains. I think he's afraid of exactly his warning in the sense of his variance.
Sure. This will be a fun one to watch play out. So I'm going fiction on it, but it's a fun idea, and it would be fascinating if they did it.
And I'm a fact. I'm a definite fact because I like the idea of it, and I'm really enjoying. Like I'm kind of with Travis on Geekverse in the sense of Loki being on the Avengers team. I really want to see that. I think that would be excellent idea.
Is he? And I feel like those two things are mutually exclusive. I don't think you can get both of those.
No, that's fine. I'll take either or. That's fine.
For the record, I think him popping up on the Avengers has far more likelihood than him as He Who Remains. Either way would be a win for us because he Who Remains is a fascinating idea. Him on the Avengers, that's just got so much potential to be fun. So I sign me up for either of them.
Keep reading Avengers forever.
I will. I've read Avengers 1 through 11, and now I'm into whatever that series was, and now I'm into the jumping back and forth stuff. I will. Please, no spoilers.
No spoilers. I'm just saying, like it's gonna be fun.
There has been multiverse hijinks, and it has been fun.
All right, so we will post all 3 of these Sunday afternoon to let your voices be heard, and let us conclude tonight with, as we always do, Comic Book Club. Punisher, the Punisher. Welcome back, Frank. Issue number 5. You know, we had a lot of fun in the last issue. This one kind of took a little kind of pause in the sense of, antics, as it were.
How did she survive?
Yeah,
the polar bears, whatever it was. How I want to know how she got out of there.
I don't know how she got out of there. I don't know. We got razzling polar bears at that point. Getting, why not comics?
Well, it's fair enough, yeah. But I mean, really that opening scene, just help me out on her name. Ganucci? No,
Maguchi.
Maguchi. Thank you. The that opening scene of her just laying on the bed with the get well soon card next to her,
Yeah, that's
screaming at all her henchmen. I mean, I enjoyed it, and just telling like, "Hey, dimwit, don't do this," and then, "Hey, stupid, kill dimwit," and then, "Hey,
yeah.
idiot, kill stupid who didn't kill dimwit," and just going down the line until she eventually gets to one who will do it, and then she's like, "Finally."
Yeah, and I think that's just Ennis's and Dylan's very sick and twisted humor with that first opening page. That's just them. That's who they are. They've made no. I mean, remember
Yeah,
these are
yeah,
the
yeah,
co-creators of The Boys. So
yeah. I mean that is right in their wheelhouse for sure.
exactly. So, like I said, this issue as a whole is definitely a kind of see where we're at this point and kind of reset the board and see what's going on. I mean, we get, our two cops that are, trying to figure out what to do and where to go from here. We get our murderous serial killing Catholic priest who is continuing his journey, and then we get this randomness of Mr. Payback.
I something about that design just feels so lazy to me, and I kind of think that's the point.
Yep,
Like
I
the
agree.
character's not supposed to look like they have this awesome super suit, but I'm just like, I don't even want to look at you. It's just such a boring design.
Yeah, and then we get another character randomly in there. I am the elite. I am elite.
I'm not a huge fan of the mask here. Like, there's something
Yeah.
I think it's because it just looks flat, and I feel like there should be a little bit of three dimensions to it, right? Kind
Or
of
how do you breathe?
how do you breathe? Yeah, like it needs something like the Court of Owls cut mask in Batman. They come to a little point, right? Like I feel like it needs something, but interesting. And I was kind of hooked on this guy when he killed the dog. I was like, okay, you're fascinating. You have my attention. I'm looking forward to seeing the Punisher take you down.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you need to go down. You don't hurt animals like that. So, no matter how much they annoy you, just no,
Indeed.
no, no, no. So, all right, like I said, this is definitely a low point right now for me. This issue was not a fan. It gave me some chuckles here and there, but yeah, hopefully next issue picks up on it.
Certainly not as good as the last couple. I'm
No.
with you on that.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, as we expected, a much longer episode, but definitely some good discussion points. Like I said, I will be off next week, so I will enjoy listening. And you know, as soon as Loki episode drops, I write my own notes at that point. So I'll be looking forward to not having to do that. I do stay up pretty late doing that at that point to get all my thoughts down.
Yeah, and so we'll skip Comic Book Club next week, and then we'll come back to it the week after that. And yeah,
Exactly.
Heinz will be joining us next week. Go ahead and send in those questions as you have them. You don't have to wait for me to put out the Spidey signal. Send them in.
Yeah, send them in. DMs are open on both of them. If you send them to me, I'll drop them in our. Brent and I have a shared note that way we always catch everyone's questions.
That's the idea.
All right. Yep, exactly. So before we say our official goodbyes, again, I always want to plug our sponsor, gettingpricebooks.com. Use that code Marvel GUA at checkout to get $2 off every single order. Brent, tell people how they can follow you.
Yeah, Brent Tech Prime on the socials. I am trying to use Threads a little bit more. So if you're on Threads and you're not on the dumpster fire that is Twitter, then that's fine. Shoot your questions over to me on there. I'm technically on like Blue Sky and Mastodon too, but honestly, I check them far less. So and pretty much everybody I follow is on all four places. So I'm still experimenting with them.
Yeah. You can follow me on X, Twitter, every other social is pretty much there at Chris Balga. You can follow this show on X at Marvel A Podcast. You can email the show at marvelalliancepodcast@gmail.com. You can follow the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network on X at GUA Pod Network. Feel free to, we're still calling it tweeting because saying Xing just sounds like ridiculous and stupid. Or email and provide feedback, ask questions. DMs are open. Continue to rate and review the Marvel Alliance solo feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you all for listening live in the chat. We had a lot of live discussion, a lot of live listeners tonight, so we really appreciate that. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. And stay safe out there, everyone. And as Stan the Man would say, Excelsior, true believers. All right. Post-credits discussion. Well, tickets went on sale for the Marvels. I know you got your tickets. Because of my new position at that point, I will be having to see movies more later at night at that point, since I'm getting out later from work. But the good thing is that weekend, it's Veterans Day weekend, so I don't have to worry about staying out late because I have Friday off. So Marvel projected openings weekend. This is coming from Box Office Pros. They are saying that the Marvels is projected to earn between 50 million and 75 million domestically over its opening weekend, and between 121 and 189 million in total domestically. For context, here are some of the recent opening weekends to compare those projections. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, 118.4 million. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, 104 million. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, 181 million. Thor: Love and Thunder, 144 million. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, 187 million. The MCU's other 2023 films, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Quantumania, were projected to earn 120 million and 96 million, respectively. So this is a far cry from the first Captain Marvel film, which estimated to make over 100 million its opening domestic weekend, and some experts even offering more enthusiastic projections of upward of 120 million. This 50 to 75 boom is roughly half of what was estimated for The Flash, which after a very poor box office projections would go on to become one of the biggest financial failures in studio history. Should the Marvels hit the low end of the projections, it would become the new record holder for the MCU's lowest domestic opening weekend, taking over the spot from The Incredible Hulk, which opened to 55 million during its run in 2008. So, we had talked about this before with you and me, with Travis when he's been on. We've had Factor Fictions kind of toying this around. I know Travis had been under 60 million was his prediction still, and he's kind of holding to it. Man, the SGA, the SAG strike is not looking like it's going to end before this, so that cast is probably not going to be out there. That is definitely going to hurt. We've got the toxicity of people who are just anti-Brie Larson, anti this film. I am, it just hurts.
You have three women leading this movie. One of them is Brie Larson, which people hate for stupid reasons.
Yes.
The other two are women of color, which people hate for stupid reasons. And so it all of that is going to hurt. The SAG strike, like you talked about, SAG after it, like not being able to get these three marketing this movie together really, really hurts. And it almost makes me wonder if going forward, when you're coming up on like strike years, if you need to have people put together marketing material that they can release early, super early, just so they have something in case, how long is the WGA one in 3 years or whatever? It's assuming SAG is something similar. Just in that third year, if you have a movie coming out, get some material put together. And even if they have to put a disclaimer, filmed before the strike, like just something, because man, it sucks not getting the three of those. The first movie opened to $153 million. Captain Marvel.
We know that was because it was the movie leading to his Endgame.
It was the movie. It was the last movie before Endgame. There was the tease of Infinity War was teasing her. Definitely had a boost from that. Very different times right now. It was also pre-COVID. Very, very different times right now. It's just sad to think that this movie could open to a third or less than a third of what that did. These projections are not good. Snell is going to be in the ballpark. He may not be technically to the letter correct, like with saying right under 60 million or whatever, but he's in the ballpark. Like he's already, it's already a Travis told you with this range. It is like it would have to massively overperform. And some of the movies have overperformed, but not to this extent. Like Ant-Man, came in above projections, but not to the amount that we would need. No, not huge, but enough to cross the 100 mark.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully this movie is going to have really positive word of mouth. At this point, that's what it's going to bank on. That's what they have to have because they can't do any of the other real marketing.
It's also the idea of how people take the news of it being an hour and a half.
Yeah, and that might actually help them as far as getting more showtimes, but they got to get they got to get people in the seats in those showtimes.
Yeah, and if you get a
And
lot of like people coming out of the theaters like, meh, meh, yeah, that's not gonna be good.
no, it's
They
not.
they're gonna wait till it drops on Disney Plus and be happy about it.
And it helps kind of that Guardians Volume 3 and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania didn't have that 45-day release window and then go straight to Disney Plus. People like I feel like people there's been enough movies now that they know that like Disney's not really doing that anymore. So take that into consideration. That doesn't mean they're not going to still wait for Disney Plus, but they may take it into consideration that they're going to be waiting longer. And if people don't view this as a much watch, they're not going to be as worried about getting spoiled. And frankly, this really hurts to say it. It probably doesn't help that Nick Fury's in this movie after the turnout of Secret Invasion. Like, if that show turned people off, they're not like that's not going to be a selling point. No, I don't think anyone's going to say I'm skipping it because he's in it, but he's not going to be a selling point that normally Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury would be.
The thing I hope about this movie is what you were saying earlier and what I've been saying earlier, and I've even said on this show before. Even if the movie does not perform well, there still could be good coming out of this. And if people who do see it, the tracking says they love Aman Vellani as Kamala Khan, that's how you get a season 2. It
Yeah.
may not be necessarily because the Marvels was a huge hit, because man, people loved seeing her in that one. She did a great job at that point. That's how you get a season 2. That's why you haven't gotten an official green light, because they need to see how this does and the response to her on a general audience scale.
All in the Game says that the MCU is on a record 6 consecutive $100 million plus opening weekends, and this could crack. If this cracked 100, it would keep that streak. I think that streak is over. I think
Yep,
that
I
streak
do
is
too.
over. Quantumania was at least expected to come in at 96, and people were excited for Quantumania. They were excited for to see Jonathan Majors as King. Like, people were hyped for that movie in a way they're just not hyped for this one. This one is not gonna. I will be absolutely stunned if this thing. Like, I think 80 million would be a massive weekend after looking at these numbers.
It was already going to be rough if Dune was opening at the same time at that point. Now that Dune's not here, yeah, they've got a chance of maybe doing a little bit kind of in the middle of those
It
projections.
was going to be a disaster if Dune had opened.
Yeah.
Like, looking at what these projections are with no Dune, and Dune had all the IMAX screens. It's not the case anymore. The
Yeah.
Marvels does have IMAX screens. It was going to be a disaster if they had left it. Frankly, it was going to be like The Flash, like just absolute box office bomb, and that would be horrible.
Yeah, it's going to be, you know, again, a lot of mutuals that we follow. BD even said it like I said like I think I'm paraphrasing, like hating how the toxicity is just going to destroy the Marvels without this cast.
Oh, they went woke, so they went broke and all that bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, we'll see. But, you know, Brent and I will be seeing it because, again, we see these movies for you, the people at that point, and we'll support it because, again, we like these characters. We enjoy what they've been putting out. So, hey, here we go. So, all right. Brent will see you next week. I will see you in 2 weeks, and enjoy Loki season 3 next week. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.